Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to today's webinar topic on understanding our manufacturer connection. This feature in LandFX has been growing so much since our presenter today, Damian Knight, joined our team and took it over. I know he's been tirelessly working with our content team, including myself, to add more and more suppliers every month, improving the interface and even expanding everything to include access to paver manufacturers. So it's such a great tool. I used it as a landscape architect too, but just being able to grab the right bench and place it all within CAD, not having to hunt it down on a website, which means leaving CAD and breaking my design flow. You're going to see everything just ends up at your fingertips right when you need it. First, our usual housekeeping for the live viewers. At the top of the screen, you'll see view options where you can exit full screen into windowed mode if you need to. At the bottom of the window, you're going to see our Q&A box. Think up some great questions and we'll answer all of them. Lastly, we're going to be recording, so you will find the recording, like always, at landfx.com/webinars later today. But I think right now is a perfect time to pass this all over to Damian.
Thanks very much, Amanda, and hello to everyone in the audience today. It's nice to be back on this platform, and hopefully this will be an interesting topic for you. But this webinar basically aims to move you forward from any past experiences of having to download what is essentially raw or unmanaged content from external resources, and then be forced to make, time-consuming edits to that content in order for it to simply work to your office standards. We want to also emphasize the benefits of using this LandFX exclusive tool and touching on a couple of sides of the product specification process as well. So a little bit, very short note about myself. I work directly with manufacturers in getting their products into our database, and sometimes that's an easy process. Sometimes it's a little more time consuming, but that's my work on a daily basis, is making sure that we're accommodating all kinds of products relative to the wider landscape design industry. But I'm also involved in creating some of the manufacturer content as well, sometimes being involved in the development of the software tools that relate to utilizing such content. So that's kind of my work in a nutshell. But here is a quick outline of what we're going to go through today. And it's pretty straightforward. So getting right into it, let's clarify something first. What is the manufacturer connection? And we define it as kind of a dynamic combination of two things. So first and foremost, it's an easy to use software tool that provides a place for designers to browse catalogs and spec products within CAD. We found a disconnect in a highly valuable part of the design process where designers were having to do too much of the tedious manual work in product specifications, and working typically within the limitations of who or what was already known to them. So secondly, we created something that is also a bit of a relationship builder. Some designers will see manufacturers they've not seen before, so that's a little bit of an introduction there. And we've also provided, that well-located platform that allows the designer to learn about products on the go, in turn enabling them to have a more educated conversation with the manufacturer when it gets to that detailed ordering process. So as the designer, you're able to browse the manufacturer catalogs in LandFX, place smart blocks and symbols into your plans, all based on the products that you want to specify. As the manufacturer, your products get seen on a platform that really makes a difference in the lifespan of the project. The necessary information is set in the product models and details, which provides the designer with a really quick way to accessing and using your product information. And honestly, it really is that easy, and it's why we emphasize this relationship for such a good reason. And being able to request manufacturers will kind of highlight just one reason why everyone in the relationship is actually so valuable. So moving over to that, I wanted to go over this right from the go, because it's really important to us that you guys know that you can do this as a designer. And you might be thinking, well, hang on a minute, I can do that? But yeah, you can. And let me tell you, there's a couple of ways that manufacturer products can be requested. And the first, to do that, I'm actually going to take you over to the manufacturer website, or product manufacturer page, sorry, and scrolling down past some fun videos, you'll see a list of all of our manufacturer partners. And if you keep going down past that, you don't see the manufacturer you want, you can simply hit this button and it's going to give you a little pop-up form which you can fill out, add some little details into those fields there, and hit send. And this request comes directly to me, so if you can be as thorough and as specific about the product that you would like in, that's going to help us out a lot, and it's going to yield the quickest turnaround time. So just a little something there. And the other way that you can actually get product specified, or requested, is by you as the designer, as the specifier. If you're a regular of any given manufacturer, you can let them know how valuable to you having their products in Land Effects would be. We do get those quite often, but again, just clarifying that that is something that can happen. And having spoken with so many manufacturers over just the last couple of years, I know for a fact that they enjoy hearing from the designer and getting connected with you all. So, if they're not yet involved, hearing from you guys actually makes them want to be a part of this great relationship and software tool. And so we're going to go to how do you actually go about telling which manufacturers are partnering while you're in CAD. So the easiest way to tell when you're looking at one of the manufacturer lists is basically by the full color logo, and that manufacturer has basically the necessary information that you would need to add products to your project. If it's a faded logo, on the flip side, they're either one of two things. They're under development, so it means that we're working on them, or they're not partnering. So these guys are going to sit at the bottom of that that manufacturer list, and it just means that the look is a less flattering catalog, and certainly there's a little limited information in regards to the products, but that's just because we can't put the effort into building out something that isn't necessarily supporting you guys out there in the design community. So we kind of just have to draw the line there. But we have some minimum resource requirements in order to make sure that the designer is getting the most out of the content that we provide and that we're connecting them to. And we always have to make the determination of what is the minimum amount of product information that you guys need to get the product on plan. And there is immense variation in the data that we enter for each product type. That's just a fact, but we also have to factor in that each manufacturer has a different way of structuring their product lines and also creating their resources. So it really is going to vary. For paver manufacturers, or paving patterns or hatches, we need the pattern files, which I will explain and expand on in the next segment. But we need that particular resource. We also prefer to have an in-context image, which guides you on the broader style of the hardscape that you'll end up with, right? So it's a very, very styled image. And then we also need the laying pattern image that kind of shows you the actual components of the pattern that you're trying to specify. Just makes things a little bit clearer as you nail that selection down. For site amenities, we prefer the following because not everyone has each resource available, and sometimes we can fill in the gaps, but at bare minimum, we prefer to have a DWG CAD file. And a SketchUp model would be great too. Don't need it, but it would be great. A nice clean image so that there's no external distractions, taking your vision and interaction away from the product itself. So we want to be really clear about what it is we're showing. And also a detail cut sheet too, which just helps us create those refined details down the track. And sometimes they are actually the same resource, which is fine, but all of this information is really helpful. And for lighting fixtures and other lighting equipment, it's pretty straightforward at the moment, but we're actually going through some development for the landscape lighting side of things. So this might change a little bit, but basically getting the specification options is crucial in providing designers with everything from the outset. So that's really the most important thing. And again, another clean image of the fixture itself. It's the main visual cue that the designer needs outside of the data. And a detail cut sheet as well. Again, if you're going to get the most well-rounded smart objects, this is how it's going to help. And now we're going to take a bit of a look at the crucial procedures for creating the content, why we take the time to do them, and just how effective those procedures are in making this content so valuable. And just wanted to highlight, we have a great team behind the scenes. Not everyone's shown in this image. We have a large team, but you know, we are working tirelessly to make sure our content is built to the highest possible standards. And this is just a summary of our procedures for setting up patterns or hatches. And I did say I would expand on the pattern files. So in looking at that, if you're unfamiliar with pattern files or PAT files, it's defined as a text file that contains definitions for model or drafting patterns, right? They are basically the coded makeup for all of our favorite hatches. And AutoCAD doesn't have an official way of creating hatches. So doing this on your own isn't exactly recommended, just due to the time and understanding it takes to create them. So when we get one of these from the manufacturer, we audit the name of the file. We also audit the title written within the file. And the reason we do that, even though it seems small, is just because when they're coded into the back end in our database, everything needs to be named exactly the same. So we save them into our local drive because that's where they need to be before they're loaded into the AutoCAD hatch tool. And that's before we can even save them into Land Effects. And then we get them placed into a bit of a master file, renaming the hatch again like we did previously, making sure it's exactly the same, setting the default scale, which the pattern will then eventually come in at when it's added to a project. So this is the process we go through for some site amenities products, and it's pretty thorough just because of the smart nature of the finished blocks. And we'll go through a couple of comparisons of how this stuff looks before we've done anything with it versus after we've actually done this process and optimized it. So this is a typical resource that we're given, and the level of information within this resource is great overall, but definitely excessive from a block standpoint. And you can see that from just the sheer number of objects in the bottom. You know, it's such a large file, and unnecessarily so. You know, even the part of the resource that we actually want, you know, it has an immense number of lines. But after all of our work, you'll get something that looks like what is on the right, and just comparing those two basically block properties, you can see that there is an immense difference. And how that block looks on the printed side, in paper space, really makes a big difference when you consider the actual size these are going to be printed on plan, which is way smaller than what I'm actually showing here. But everything needs to be legible and aesthetically pleasing as possible, right? So this stuff really matters. And if you don't want any line work standing out like what's on the left there, again, it's still really, really important. And so just touching on the 3D model side of things, which we have for all of our site amenities stuff, I just want to show the process and differences in the content again, because it highlights again just how valuable the manufacturer connection is. We won't play around too much. We won't play around in SketchUp at all today, though, because honestly, it could be a whole other webinar. But we have a guy who is honestly a bit of a wizard when it comes to this stuff, and this is his typical checklist and procedure for going through creating a product for an existing resource that we didn't actually have. And this happens sometimes, as I mentioned. Sometimes we're able to fill in the gaps of a certain piece of data that's missing, and SketchUp is probably the easiest one to be able to do that. Where he's basically building a model based off the CAD block and the product specs that's listed on the manufacturer's website. So having a couple of pieces of those information is really really crucial. But this slide gives you a pretty amazing comparison on the models before and after they've been audited. You can see there's huge differences in the level of geometry for each object. And we know that there's typically a product or a software like SolidWorks that's exporting these as raw models and doesn't take into account maybe being able to simplify them a little bit. But after that, there's no apparent cleanup work, which can add time and frustration if you're trying to add multiple objects into your 3D model. It's just going to slow things down quite a bit. But lastly, on the building of content, I wanted to show just a couple of details procedures, which is similar to the site amenities stuff, just while highlighting 2 points. And the first is, of course, reiterating the optimization of the content. But looking at that, you can see there's some pretty crazy line color selection in this permeable pavement detail. Now, whether you look at details in model space or not, you still want to be able to easily see and read anything within that detail. Again, the legibility is key. At the file size, again, another difference. And even though it translates well enough over to paper space, there can certainly be some better line work and layer management. So this is, before and after we've messed around with it a little bit. And the other thing we do with details, and sometimes, and only sometimes, the manufacturer might go against this, is to consolidate the number of overall details relating to a single product. And this single detail of a living wall is pretty comprehensive in showing elevations, sections, and even detail enlargements, as well as even the recommended irrigation method. And I know I've done this a little backwards in the comparison, but I wanted to do that particular way so that you'd start wondering how many details we actually drew and condensed to get this one. And I'm wondering if anyone guessed 6. So that single detail took information from all of these 6 details and condensed it down into one. So you know, we really try hard to make it as easy for the designer and the specifier as possible. And another thing about the details is you can take the foundation of what we've laid out for you and customize them to meet your individual requirements if you really need to. But now we get to the juicy stuff. So I'm going to show you how all of this ties together in Land Effects. So we'll shift over, but I'm wondering, Amanda, if there's any questions so far.
No questions right now, but definitely I think some are starting to come in, so we will kind of get to those and then maybe revisit them at the end.
All right, cool. I'll keep on going then. Oh, let's get back to that. All right, so we've got our CAD plan here, and let me just maximize that full screen. And before I go anywhere, I'm just going to unload my planting landscape XREF, just so I get a clear, uninterrupted view of all my hardscape areas. And I'm going to open up ref notes by typing that into the command line. I can also hit this ref notes manager button up in the FX site ribbon, and it's going to give me this nice populated list here. And ref notes is basically the hub for selecting and managing all hardscape and site related items. And I've got a couple of things in here already, but I want to add a couple more things before we go. And just before we get too far, I want to mention that being able to filter your ref notes by type so that you can attack each segment systematically is just a really cool thing to be able to do, especially when the list starts building up, you know, and being fully populated with items. You want to be able to track things nice and easily. But I'm going to add, after I close that, I'm going to add a new ref note, and I actually want to add a new area. So I'm going to hit area there, and it's going to pop up this nice little dialog box here. And just a quick note on this list, Ackerstone is currently being set up. As I said, you can often find manufacturers who are either under development, and these are one of those guys, and they'll be adjusting shortly, but for the purposes of today, I'm going to be consistent and go with Unilock, and it's going to give me Unilock's catalog essentially. And upon navigating this dialog, you can see just that really nice stylized image. It's just going to give me just such a clear picture about what kind of finish my pavers are going to end up going for, and even being able to navigate between the different paver types is just such an intuitive way to go through the selection process. So I'm actually going to pick one of these, and now it's giving me all the laying pattern options for this particular paver style. So I'm going to hit this one and it gives me the model name, description, and it even gives me this little more info link, which if I click, that link is going to pass me directly to the manufacturer's website for this product specifically. So being able to access any additional information right out of the gate is so useful. Even though I'm not going to use anything for this purposes, but being able to do that is so cool. I'm going to add that to my project now, and it pulls the model name and description into this note, which I can edit if I really wanted to. For now, I'm just going to leave it as is because it's pretty well perfect. And I'm also now going to be able to set a division. Now I could use the CSI divisions, or I can use this basic division and keep it in line with the rest of my ref notes which I've already set up. Now the next option I'm going to highlight is being able to set a detail, and being able to do that at this stage of the design process rather than at the end is just such a handy thing. You know, you can pick and choose when you want to do these things, and it really allows for a personal design process and design flow to be maintained. So I'm going to hit new because none of those pre-selected details are actually what I wanted. And when you first look at these lists, you know, it might take a couple of times to figure out, you know, where things are, which is totally fine. But in looking for a unilock detail for these pavers, I'm going to be looking for the manufacturer's name. And so I know for a fact that they're under site improvements. Right down here is unilock. And if I click on any of these subcategories here, you can see that we've got some different details that we can choose from specific to the unilock paver types that we saw in the catalog, right? So I actually want to pick this detail right here. I'm going to add that to my project. It's going to say it's been added, great, and done. So that's going to populate up in my details manager, and I'm going to hit OK. And then that detail name has populated in this field right here. So you know it's good. You know it's linked to this specific ref node. Now I can move on to picking leader styles and callout styles, which you can again vary from this this selection here. For pavers and hardscape stuff, I'm actually going to pick this second leader type and the hex callout. That's what I've decided on. You can mix and match those as much as you like. But once I click done, you can see that that product that I just searched for is now in my ref nodes list. Now I'm going to, before I get too much further, pick another site amenity. And the site navigation is pretty similar. Again, you can see this list here. You can filter it by equipment type, right? So we want to make things as easy navigation-wise as possible. I'm going to pick a Nova. And again, navigating through this stuff is just so easy, so intuitive, and being able to see all the different styles of things is really cool. But I'm going to pick a trash receptacle, something easy. It gives me all the different models within that series. I'm actually going to pick this one, and again, the model description, it's very clear cut. I'm able to access their website and product page if I want to, and add that to my project. Change the division, site furnishings is good. I'm not going to give this one a detail. For my site furnishings, I'm going to have this leader type and a square callout. So there's going to be a little variation here, and go OK. And again, populating in the list is just super cool to see. So now I get to place some of this stuff, and we can do that using some really fun and intuitive tools. But first you'll want to actually pick the specific product that you want to place, okay? And you can do that by double clicking, or you can use the place button down here. And I want to say pick a hatch, and again, when you're placing hatches, you want to make sure there is a closed polyline that you're placing within, or it's going to actually prompt you to draw a closed line, okay? So that's just one thing to keep in mind. But I've placed something there. I'm going to place these permeable pavers over here. I'm going to place this paver type, which I selected, right in there. And you know, when you pick, when you start to place the site furnishings objects, being able to place and manipulate things on the fly is and as easy as this is so cool. You know, just literally clicking it, placing it in the desired area, rotating it to, you know, that angle that you want, is just really cool. So I actually want to add some bike racks in over here. Well, I'll just add one for now. One more bench, let's say, goes right here. And the trash can, which I want to place right here. So I've kind of got a well-rounded number of products in there. And now what I'm going to be able to do, and what I want to show actually, is if you've got some of these generic objects like I do in my plan, the umbrellas, which are located right here, what you can do is, if you have then placed some smart objects in your plan like I just did, is you can use the, where is it? The match properties tool. Okay, so this basically allows you to pick a source object and then turn that into that smart object, which is just really cool to be able to do so quickly. You know, you don't need to delete and then replace anything. You can just pick that object and hit match properties, and it's going to it's going to change that right on the go, and it's going to leave those items exactly where you've placed them. And you could see that they shifted slightly just to the one side. That's just based on the insertion point, so that's nothing really to be too worried about. But being able to do that so fast is pretty unreal. And now if you decide that you want to add more instances of these objects on the go, you can use our match object tool, and that essentially is in the same spot, and what it does is make copies of that particular source object that you've selected. So I can pick my pavers and say I want to add to this median strip. I'm picking that closed polyline, and it's instantly added another couple of areas based on the information that you have used as your source. So again, being able to build out your site design in such a quick and easy way really shows and highlights so much benefit to the designer, you know, during such a, well, what could be a long and tedious process. Now, the next tool I actually wanted to show and highlight is one of our probably favorite tools, certainly internally speaking. I know Jake, I'm sure most people know Jake, loves to actually show this off at trade shows, and that is our copy along line tool. And we have a copy along polyline, copy along arc, and a line, but for this particular purpose, I'm going to use the copy along polyline, and I'm going to select my source object. Now, the only thing to keep in mind is you're going to want to have an existing polyline to go off, but you can draw one as well, as you're prompted to, but I've got an existing one, and what it's going to do is show me this non-plot line on my plan, which I can just follow, and it's going to replicate that source object as far as I drag it around this line, which is really cool. Just being able to pull it along this line and duplicate that specific source product. Now, some tools actually have keyboard shortcuts, and if you're ever in doubt about what those are, just look at your command line, right? So you can see mine actually prompts me to use the keyboard commands. So I'm going to hit K, and that pops up this nice little dialogue here. and just is basically a cheat sheet for all the keyboard commands relating to this specific tool. I'm actually going to use the specify spacing distance and hit 1, and it's going to give me this nice little box here where I can insert my desired feet between blocks. So I'm just going to say 30 feet and go OK. And now every 30 feet, a new block is going to pop up along that line, which is super cool, right? So you can be really specific. You can be, very to the point about how far apart you're placing things and copying things, and just hit OK. And so now I have 6 bike racks, perfectly spaced, perfectly offset in this hardscape area, which is just such a cool tool, right? Now I'm going to do something similar to this trash can over here, right? So I'm going to find my copy along tool again. I'm going to select my source object. I'm actually going to pick the XREF line just to show you that those actually do work. And again, being able to draw it around this area, it's pretty night and day how cool that is. But I'm going to use a different keyboard command. So if I open that up again, just showing you what I've got, I'm actually going to use this A and D spacing, which adds about 10%. But again, if you look in your little command bar and command history, you can see what it's actually doing, spacing increments a little further apart every time I hit that D button, or every time I reduce it by hitting the A button. So I'm actually going to look for about 5 trash cans. So I'm just going to keep on going. And yeah, being able to do that is so cool. And I'm done. So now, again, I have evenly spaced trash cans around this this circular courtyard, and it was quite literally as simple as that. Now, when plans start to get a little busy, and I'm actually going to turn my XREF back on for this particular tool, you want to start highlighting. You want to start making sure that you've got all the objects where you want them. Nothing is lingering where you don't want it. You just want to be able to identify that you've done everything as best you can. So in using a tool like Highlight Object, which you can find that button up in FX Site, you're going to easily be able to identify all instances with the selected object. So say I want to select and highlight all the instances of this permeable paved area, I can then zoom out, see if there's any instances lying around. There are not. So I know that the only 3 areas with this specific paver type are right here. And you can do that with any object, whether it's smart or not. It just really makes things a lot easier when you're trying to either remove items from your plan, or you're missing a detail or missing a ref note that you've actually wanted to change over into something a little more specific. But now we want to start labeling the plan too. And the best tool for doing this is our site callouts tool, or the ref note callout. And you can do that using this button up here, or you can go off your list and use the callout button down there. But what this allows you to do is really, really quickly find those objects in your plan using the alphanumeric characters that you've associated to each of your ref note numbers. It's going to start helping you label your plan so fast and so intuitively that you really don't need to do too much work at all. You just need to find your different objects, select one, extend the leader out, and you can see the numbers changing based on the product type it is. The leader and call out style is based, individually on those specifications and those choices that you made earlier. And even something like this, which I haven't highlighted in the plan about what that actually is yet, which is this living wall installation, and I just wanted to tie that in from the slideshow. Being able to set those callouts so quickly is just so handy when, say, you're under the pump as a designer. You've got a short deadline. You want to make sure everything's called out properly. Just use the site ref notes call out tool. It's really, really easy. And one thing that you probably want to do towards the end of using the site call out tool is check to make sure whether you've actually labeled everything, right? So what you would use is our verify callouts tool. Just hit that button and it's going to tell you which items have not been called out, and it's going to highlight those for you, making things really, really easy. So I've got some funky lines on the plan, but I haven't called out my trash cans. I haven't called out my concrete sidewalk, and I've actually got a random permeable paved area, a generic one over here. So I want to either remove those. That was one that I didn't actually want, or you can actually go ahead and call those out really quick. So let's select that object. So you can then run that tool again. It's going to tell you again which objects you again have forgotten to highlight and just show those. So it's really easy to be able to use that tool. A lot of the stuff that we have built in is built for efficiency, error checking. So we really want to try and make this process as easy as possible on you guys. So last but not least, at least for the site side of things, and probably one of the most helpful tools, I think, that just cannot be beaten in terms of benefits and time saving to the designer, is being able to generate a detailed schedule, just with all the products that you've specified, all the plants that you've specified, if you're working within the planting plans. It's just such a helpful tool. So what I'm going to do is hit schedule, and I'm not even going to touch this. I'm just going to hit OK, and we'll see what happens. So it's now telling me, let's say I want to put it right here. It's going to generate a fully detailed schedule based on the ref notes list that we've got. It's going to give me the symbol codes that I want, that I'd specified earlier. It's going to give me the descriptions of all those objects, quantities, and even the details that we had assigned, right? Which is such a cool thing, such an easy tool to get behind when you think about how long generating something like this would take just by doing it manually, right? Super cool. So I'm actually going to head back into the schedule options just to highlight some of the items and options that we missed. And I'm going to say no, but you can change the output of the destination of the schedule. And I selected drawing first. That was the default. I'm actually going to hit table this time just to show the difference. I'm going to exclude my XREFs. Let's say I just want the site furnishings division. So it's mostly going to be the objects from this list. And for the things that I want to include, I actually want to include the symbol and the code for the amenities and areas, let's just say, for the products that I've specified. So let's see what that gives us when we hit OK. So it's actually going to give me a list, tabulated format, again, with the quantities and the details, including the blocks that we've actually placed in the plan, all the way over here, right? So it takes all of the data that we have previously worked on to tie into the system for the designer and consolidates it into a couple of places that make the designer's life so much easier. So I'm going to now, just because we have a little bit of time, I'm actually going to show you a little bit about the lighting side of things, like where that ties into this overall process, just because I highlighted it in the slideshow. Now, lighting doesn't fit within the ref notes system, I should mention. So to find that, you'll head into the managers area and hit the drop down of the second button and find the lighting manager there. And it's going to pop up this box for me here. Okay, so again, if I wanted to pick a new product, a similar manufacturer selection list is going to pop up, and I'm going to pick a manufacturer, and a similar intuitive navigation process is really apparent. It's showing me all the series of products that FX Luminaire has, and if I pick on one, it starts to give me some options for that particular fixture based on the specification information that I can again find through this more info link. So, well, that's the link we need to fix, but it gives me, all the finishes that I can apply to this fixture. It gives me the wattages that I can run with, some lens options, and some mounting options as well. Now I've got a few that are already placed in here already, so I'm just going to run with these ones as they are. And I've got my transformers placed, so I'm going to place some of these LED lights. Now I'm actually also going to unload this ref node, this XREF again, just to get a clearer picture. I'll find my lighting manager again. Okay, so I want to place a series of these downlights along this line. So what do? I'm going to find that copy along line tool again, pick the source object, pick that polyline, and just start dragging things along this wall here. So again, it's just going to pick fixtures, place them and duplicate them along this line as far as you specify, really. So I'm just going to use some of my short keyboard command tools again. Probably get a little less spacing, do something like that. And I instantly have equally spaced fixtures placed on this this wall over here. So again, a lot of the tools that we have cross functions within the software. So a lot of the things that I've highlighted today are actually applicable in the planting as well as some of the irrigation side of things as well. So it's not just restricted to site and lighting, or just restricted to one and not the other. So I'm actually going to pick another another lighting object, and I'm going to place some of these where I want to actually get some uplights around my trees. So I'm going to place right around this tree line here. So I'm going to find my lighting manager, pick the fixture that I want, and start angling these two towards this tree trunk right here. Now, a cool tool that I learned very recently was MOCO Row, and I can thank Amanda for that one. I'm going to pick a base point, and again, looking in the command line, I've got a couple of options for keyboard commands that I can use, and initially, I'm going to copy all of these, or these two fixtures to each trunk, right? But what I'm going to do is now rotate, because this is a little off. I'm going to hit R, and it grabs that selection, allows me to rotate it on the go. Now I can continue working within that, copy this, continue to rotate to fit the landscape. Oh, I selected the wrong option there, but I'm going to hit C and hit that last trunk, maybe get a little better rotation on it, and instantly placed 8 fixtures, all spaced the same distance apart and rotated by group, which just speeds things up. I mean, just having to do that manually, clicking the individual one and then typing rotate, or grouping the two and then going copy across to this one, just cuts down the time so much and really makes things way, way easier. And I'm actually going to use the photo callouts for my light fixtures. I really want to make sure that the contractor or whoever it is gets to see what it is I'm actually placing on the plan. I just want to highlight that specific detail. So I've got this image right here. I'm going to hit OK. It's going to tell me the location of where all that stuff is. I don't want a drop shadow. I'm going to hit OK there. So it's going to get me to size the image first before I place the leader. But, just seeing how easy it is to do something like that and call something out, call a manufacturer's product out is so cool. And I'm actually going to do the same thing over here. Going to pick this fixture. I've got a different light. It's a down light this time. And size the image and run that call out there. I do have a couple of other objects which I can do, a couple of transformers that I threw in for good measure. Again, size the image, and obviously they're a little mismatched in size, but I'm just doing this stuff on the fly. Being able to get such a well-rounded plan with all these different call-out styles is so cool. I'm actually going to run the lighting schedule, and even though it doesn't have the same, I guess, definitions as the ref notes tool, still being able to generate a a detailed schedule this fast with all my fixtures, all the information that's tied to those objects, is just unparalleled. I mean, trying to do all this manually, I don't ever want to go back to regular AutoCAD after using all of this stuff. But just really rounds out the efficiency of the tools that we provide in LandFX, especially in relation to the manufacturer products, tying all of that information that we talked about earlier in the slideshow, being able to pull it into CAD and use it and manipulate it in the ways that we want, to me is just a really unparalleled functionality. But yeah, we're trying to do a little bit more on the lighting front this year, so I try and stay tuned to updates in that arena. But yeah, for me, that's about it. Do we have any questions, Amanda?
Yeah, that was actually really cool. Very exciting. We have a lot of questions. Everybody's getting really excited about some of the things you showed. Uh, One of the things that really was a hit was that MOCO Row.
Mm.
So it's MOCORO for those who didn't see it go through, short for Move, Copy, Rotate. And it's actually in the home ribbon on FXCAD 2019. If you guys haven't found it there, it's a really cool tool. We thought it was so good that we actually added it in where it isn't normally. And then we have, one thing I'm not sure if you covered, maybe you did, was being able to use that edit object tool to just like even pick up an object and one of these manufacturer objects and see the information about it. That edit objects next to the match tools.
Oh yeah, I didn't actually highlight that. No.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, if you guys ever want to change or edit, I should say edit that object or even change it um, to
Or even
another actual object or a product, you can
or
just hit
at a cost. Yeah.
yeah, you can hit that symbol and it takes you immediately back to the manufacturer selection dialog, right? So you can start that process over again if you need to change all instances of an object, or even just the one. But yeah, adding a cost, let's say it's 500. Go, okay. When you go to regenerate that schedule again, let's go no, just to include the cost this time and hit OK. When I pop that in over here, it's actually going to, yeah, quantify that individual cost, and then based on the quantity that we've spec'd in the plan, give you the total. So that's a really cool thing.
And then Elda had a great question. She said, if we work outside the US, we don't have access to some of the manufacturers while we're building out those manufacturers. In that case, can they add those in manually in the meantime?
Yeah, so you can, if you use the reference notes, I mean, you can always use the custom objects, and you can start looking in here, and it depends on the product information that you're trying to get across. If you're just looking for a block as a placeholder, then you can use these generic objects and go say a bench. I want OK, and then edit the note to be, let's say if we're in Australia, I can go street furniture. Sorry, my typing is not great right now. Australia, Aria bench. I know that is one of their newest models. And then start working things in that way. That's going to translate across to your schedule. But in terms of being able to do the data linking, in regards to the product selection process, from here, we kind of need to help facilitate that. But again, that's why I highlighted it in the beginning, was to let you guys know that you can just ask us to add something, and especially if it's just one product that you might desperately need for that particular project, we can do that straight up. But if it's more than one product, especially in a variation sense, if it's 10, 15, or 10, 50, or 100 products, that's when we need to start reaching out to the manufacturer and saying, hey, we've got this person who's really, really wanting to get your products spec'd quicker and easier. That's when we have that conversation with the manufacturer.
Yeah, exactly. Having it already built in there just makes it a lot easier. You don't have to do all that manual stuff, which kind of rounds us out with Brian's question. Do we need to reach out to our paver manufacturers and tell them about the reference note manager? And I would say absolutely yes. Damien covered that a little bit earlier. I used to do it as well. I would have my rep come into the office and I'd just be like, here, can I just show you how easy this is? And they were usually pretty floored too, and possibly got some balls rolling.
Yeah, I mean we only released that from a paver standpoint or a hardscape manufacturer standpoint last year, so it's still pretty fresh, and I think people are still starting to figure out, how useful it can be, especially when we look at quantifying it by square footage or you know things like that. It just as long as, and this is specific to the paver manufacturers, as long as they have that pattern file information, that PAT file, then we can work it in. Some manufacturers don't actually have that pattern file, and it then kind of leads us to a point where we go, we don't create the pattern files for you. Unfortunately, it's a very involved process. So again, as long as the manufacturer has as much of the resources available as possible, then yeah, absolutely, we can start incorporating them into the software. But you know, having the designer or the specifier out there saying, "Hey, I want your products in," it certainly makes it makes our job a lot easier. But that's not to say that we're not, out there and trying to do a little marketing and outreach ourselves. But yeah, any help you guys can give us, we'll take it.
Great, and I think that pretty much wraps up our hour. Thank you guys. We covered all the other questions as well in the Q&A, but have a great weekend.
Thanks, guys. Take it easy.